So after watching those videos, we understand now the process of how fabric is made on a loom. Now let's talk about kinds of weaves. What the weave will look like as it comes from the loom depends on the way in which the harnesses lift groups of the warp yarns to let the fill yarns slip through. In complicated weaves, there may be up to 30 harnesses, but for simplest constructions, only 2 harnesses are needed. So we've talked about woven fabrics. We've talked about knit fabrics. And now we're going to talk about felted fabrics. So the first is plain weave. The plain weave is a simple interlacing of warp and fill and is the weave used by makers of basic fabrics either on hand looms or in mills. In the video you watched that talked about how an industrial loom works, one of the things they talked about was how plaid could be woven, changing different colors of threads in the bobbins. So I want to show you how that works out right now. If you look at these are the warp threads sticking straight up. Notice that we have a dark red color and we have an off-white color. If I back it up a little bit, you can see that the first bands of the plaid pattern are the off-white color. And if I come to the edge of the fabric and pull some of the weft threads out, and I get a hold of them right there, you will see that they are off-white colored threads that are pulling up. Now, if I come down here and cut into the dark red bands for the woven pattern, we have a dark red band at the top now, and I come up here and I start pulling some of the weft threads out. You will see that the ones that I'm pulling up are the dark red threads that are pulling up, the dark red weft threads. So when we have a light colored band, they are the light weft threads, and when we have a dark colored band, they are the dark weft threads that are pulling out. Basket weave. The basket weave is a variation of the plain weave, but instead of one warp and one fill yarn, it has 2 or more warp yarns and 2 or more fill yarns, which adds a fuller, bulkier texture to the fabric. Oxford shirting is an example. Twill weave. The visible diagonal line that runs through fabrics like denim is a twill weave. The weave pattern forms a stair-step look. The popular herringbone pattern in wool sports jackets is also a twill weave. Twill construction is used in work clothes and uniforms where durability is needed. So if you notice in this denim fabric, there's a sort of diagonal. Look how noticeable the diagonal is when the fabric is turned inside out. And then on this tweed. Satin weave. The satin weave is similar to the twill weave, but the diagonal line is hidden so that the surface of the fabric is smooth and polished. The sheen and graceful drape of the satin weave fabrics make them popular for formal clothes, in damask for table linen, and fine draperies. Satin weave fabrics may snag easily. And so you see the satin is very drapey, and it has high luster, is very shiny, and a smooth surface, where the weave is practically hidden. Pile weave. Terry cloth towels, corduroy pants, plush toys, and rugs can all be examples of pile weave construction. Essentially, pile weave is like a plain twill weave, with one added step. An extra warp or fill yarn is added and lifted above the surface to form loops. The loops can be left as is, bath towels for example, or the loops can be snipped off, which allows the yarn ends to unravel a little, causing a soft surface. Corduroy. Geometric and fancy weaves. Shirts with tiny geometric pattern woven into the fabric, called dobby fancies, were popular in 1910 and then 60 years later in 1970. They are made on the dobby loom, which can raise or lower the warp yarns in many variations than are possible with simpler looms. The jacquard loom. In 1801, French inventor Joseph Marie Jacquard created a loom that used punch cards to direct the weaving process. Jacquard programmed a design by cutting holes in a roll of paper. This roll was connected to a series of needles, controlling the loom mechanism that moves the warp yarns up and down. When the needles hit a hole in the paper, it made a change in the way the yarns were woven. By changing cards and altering patterns of punched holes, it was possible to mechanically create complex woven patterns. Modern jacquard looms use electronic mechanisms for controlling the weave design. New designs can be quickly downloaded to the loom from a computer. Knitting. Knitting is the process of making fabric by intermeshing loops of yarn. In hand knitting, 2 long steel or plastic needles are used. When the process is mechanized, multiple needles are arranged, either in a straight line or in a circle, to rapidly form loops of yarn into fabrics. The needle hooks grab the yarn and loop it through, quickly creating a flexible fabric. Depending on the tightness or looseness of the knit and the thickness of the yarn, the knitting process can be used to make the thinnest nylon stockings or the heaviest cable stitch sweaters. Knits are stretchable. They move with the body and are comfortable. Knits make warm outerwear because of the air spaces created by the loops of heavy yarn. The seam porous quality also helps the fabric breathe in light constructions used for summer weight knits. Look at the examples of the different stitch patterns being used in this knitted sweater. Most knits, like this fleece, have a greater degree of stretch in one direction when pulled. You see this side is fairly rigid. We have a greater degree of stretch when pulled in this direction. This lycra fabric has a much greater degree of stretch in one direction than the other, but very stretchy in both directions. And this netting is fairly rigid in both directions. So we've talked about woven fabrics. We've talked about knit fabrics. Now we're going to talk about felted fabrics. Take a good look at a piece of felt. You'll see no sign of woven or knitted construction in it, because felt is a non-woven fabric. It's made by pressing fibers of wool, fur, or animal hair together, creating sheets that can be cut and sewn like cloth. For hundreds of years, the basic non-woven fabric was felt. Today, many non-wovens are made from manufactured fibers, such as polyester, rayon, and aramids. The individual fibers may be melted and fused together, stitched into place, stuck together with adhesives, or tangled together by means of hooked needles. Water jets and lasers are also being used to make non-wovens that look and feel like traditionally woven and knitted fabrics. The process is much faster and less costly than weaving or knitting. Non-wovens are often used for disposable items, such as placemats, napkins, fabric softener sheets, desk cloths, eyeglass lens tissues, tea bags, vacuum cleaner bags, bandages and surgical gowns and masks. You will also find non-wovens used in automobiles for such things as dash insulators, hood silencer pads, and transmission oil filters. At home and school, you will find nonwovens in book covers, pennants, blankets, and tennis balls. And so notice while looking up closely at this piece of felt that while you can see the fibers, there are no threads. So do you have any felted pieces in your scouting gear?